Oh, can you hear me? Okay, so today we will start off with Unit 3, which is about government intervention in price system. Very good, excellent, right? So I'm just waiting for the other students to join and then we'll get started, right? I guess Zohan has joined us. I'll just wait for the other students to join and then we'll get started, right? Okay, so today we are starting off with Unit 3, which is about government intervention in price system, right? Now, let me give you a little bit of an overview because obviously it's very important to know what to expect from a certain unit, right? So government intervention in price system is about scenarios when government intervenes in the price system. I mean, I'm just doing the literal translation of this, but let me give you an example. Government intervention in price system. So when markets are not operating like the way they should, or let's say the market outcome is not very equitable, right? It's not very fair for all the participants in the market. Then that is, I'm good, thank you, Walaikum Assalam, Zuhan. Then that is when the government needs to intervene, or that is when the government realizes it's important for the government to intervene, right? So government intervention in price system is about situations and scenarios when government controls prices. The simplest way you can understand this is when, let me write this down for you, when government influences, could be controlled directly, sometimes it just influences, sometimes it directly controls, and we'll discuss both type of scenarios. Control prices to achieve more equitable, to achieve more equitable outcome, right? Now, let me give you an overview for two students who have just joined us, equitable outcome. Okay. Now, students, today we are starting off, as we discussed in the last class, today we are starting off with Unit 3, right, Fatin, right? So to give you a little bit of an overview. There are a total of 5 units in AS Economics. We have covered the first 2. What were the first 2? The first one was basic economic problem, in which we talked about, someone's cameras is on, right? Okay, in which we talked about basic economic problem. What is basic economic problem, right? What are resources and opportunity cost and all these things, right? So that was Unit 1. Types of economic systems, right? So these were all the topics that we covered in Unit 1, right? Then in Unit 2, we discussed demand and supply, right? So in Unit 2, we discussed demand and supply, right? In that, we discuss a couple of different things, like what is demand, what is supply, obviously, and then what are the factors that affect supply, what are the factors that affect demand, price elasticity of demand, price elasticity of supply, income elasticity of demand, income elasticity of supply. And towards the end, in yesterday's class, we talked about consumer and producer surplus, right? So all these topics that I've just said, these were part of Unit 2. Now, today we are starting off with Unit 3, right, which is about government intervention in price system. So let's first get a very clear idea of what this is about, right, and what things we'll cover in this unit, right? So government role in mixed economy, we have already discussed this, that what is the role of the government in a mixed economy, right? So mixed economy is, you would know by now, where there is presence of both public and private sectors. So I did tell you that most countries in the world have mixed economy, right? Most countries in the world, right? They have some part of economic activity is undertaken by the private sector, some economic activity is undertaken by public sector, right? Owned by the government. Okay. Now, in mixed economy, what's the role of the government? So the role of the government is to be more of it. It has, if I have to put it in simple words, the role of government in a mixed economy is paternalistic. You know what paternalistic is, right? So fatherly role, in the sense that, the government cares about the citizens, make sure that their needs are being met. I mean, obviously some countries are more successful in doing this, others are not that successful, and there could be different reasons for it. But at the end of the day, every country, right, when COVID struck, all countries in the world were trying to, help their citizens, provide them cheaper vaccination. I mean, a couple of different things and so on and so forth, right? So this is what uh, the role of government in mixed economy is. Now, how is this related to the topic that we're about to discuss? By the way, in my classes, I mean, students are free to ask me questions whenever they feel like, right? So you just need to type the comment in the chat box and I'll read it there and then I'll answer it, right? That's how we go about it. Okay, now moving forward, government intervenes in the price system. Now, this might be a new word for you, right? So let's be clear on what this is. Price system is just about the demand and supply. It's just about the markets, right? So whatever we have covered in unit 2, that was about how markets operate, right? How price system operates. There's demand for a thing, there's supply for a thing. Where demand and supply intersect, that is market equilibrium. That determines equilibrium price, that determines equilibrium quantity. So all that stuff that we covered in unit 2 is price system or market system, right? You can use these two words interchangeably. Now, not always the price system is fair, right? Not always the price system is fair. Do remember this. Let me give you a real life example so that you can better relate to it. Think of food items, right? How many of you think, I'm not take example of any other country, right? Let's talk about Pakistan. How many of you think that, given the prevailing inflation and given the food prices especially, I mean, everyone can easily afford food in Pakistan? I'm talking about basic food. Quick yes or no answers, right? Do you think everyone can easily afford food in Pakistan given the income levels and given the prices, right? So not really, no, thank you, Sohan, right? So that's the thing, right? And we do know that there are some people living below the poverty line, right? They can't afford even the basic necessities and stuff like that, right? And this does happen in most countries in the world, right? There is homelessness in US as well and stuff like that. Okay, now think about this. Don't you think that there is a role for the government to, there is a role in this case for government to help its citizens, right? Obviously there is. So when price system is not very equitable, you know what equitable is, right? Fair, right? Fair, right? Then that is when the government will intervene. How will government intervene? That is what we'll talk about in this unit, right? So when government influences control prices to achieve more equitable outcome, because the prevailing outcome, prevailing equilibrium is not very equitable. That's why the government needs to intervene. Easy, students, are you getting me? Right? Okay, now this being said, we'll move a little forward and talk about situations, right? Situations or scenarios, right? Scenarios where market equilibrium is not equitable, where market outcome is not equitable. So I want you to just give me some examples where you think someone is being unfairly, someone is being treated unfairly, or there is something unfair about someone, right? Situations scenarios where market outcome is not fair, right? So that's what I want you to think about, right? So I just gave you one example. Can you think of similar examples? So the first example that I gave you is that not everyone in Pakistan can afford basic food items, right? So that is one situation where poor people or people who are living below the poverty line needs to be helped, right? That's one situation, right? Food affordability. I'm just talking about in simple English. We'll convert all of this in economics jargon in a bit, right? Food affordability, right? Can everyone afford food or not? That was the first thing, right? What other situations can you give me like this? Use whatever language you can. Okay, what else? Not everyone can afford good healthcare, very good affordability, right? So, I mean, I will write it down because these are two very basic things, right? But yeah, that's correct, right? So not everyone can easily afford food, healthcare, very good. What else? Now, education, that's also part of it, right? But still, think about this. In all these situations, one thing is common, right? Affordability. We're talking about affordability of basic things, right? Khadija, that's correct. Good point. So, but it's again related to affordability. Can we think of some other examples as well? Think about it. Right? Where market outcome is not fair. What could be other scenarios? I do totally agree that all these basic things, because obviously education, healthcare, food, I mean, these are the fundamental, basic human rights and so on, right? So if anyone in any country cannot afford these basic necessities, then obviously it's government's responsibility to make sure that it provides them. What else? Okay, think about this. Was COVID vaccination a basic necessity? I mean, some can argue yeah, some can argue no, right? But let's not try to complicate it too much. I mean, a pandemic struck the world, right? And the governments knew across globe that if they would not provide vaccination, right, for free or at discounted prices, a lot of people will not be able to afford, or even if they can afford, they might not get themselves vaccinated because people underestimate. The external cost is high due to industrial operation. Exactly. Very good point. I'm coming to it. I'm coming to it. Yeah, that's correct, Zohan. These are the type of examples I was talking about. Okay. Let's just think about this. So, very recent thing that happened in this world, which was unknown to us previously, is a pandemic, right? Every country in the world arranged vaccinations for their citizens. Some countries obviously developed on their own, America and other countries, I don't know, right? But not every country was able to do that. Countries that were not able to produce vaccination for their citizens, they got it imported from other parts of the world, from other countries, right? But they did provide these vaccinations, COVID vaccinations to their citizens, or either for free or at a discounted price. Why? Because they knew otherwise people would not buy and not get themselves vaccinated. So what I'm trying to bring your attention to, let's use a different color. So what I'm trying to bring your attention to, under consumption of merit goods. We did talk about this, students. We did talk about this, right? So some of you might be new to this word, but you will remember when we talked about types of economic systems, I did tell you what is merit good, and it did tell you that merit goods are underconsumed, underconsumption of merit goods, right? So this is something that you need to know, right? Even to some extent, education and healthcare are also merit goods, right? Because there could be cases where people can afford education, but they might not get themselves educated a lot because they don't fully realize the benefits of being educated, right? Similarly, people might have affordability for healthcare, but they might not get healthcare to the extent which they should, because I mean, they are underestimating the benefits of merit goods. So there's always underconsumption of merit goods. Are you getting me? Easy? Right. Then another thing, right, linked to this, yes, exactly. What about demerit goods? I mean, everyone in the world knows, like literally everyone in the world knows, smoking is harmful, drinking is harmful, driving fast is harmful, dangerous, right? And blah, blah, blah. The list goes on, right? But still, there's so many people in the world who still do that, right? Yes or no? Am I making sense to you or not? Right? So this is, all these things are known as demerit goods. So we do see that a lot of people overconsume these demerit goods. Overconsumption of demerit goods. Am I making sense? Right? Now, who will stop them, right? Stopping meaning, I mean, discourage them. Discourage would be a better word, right? So who will discourage them from using those things? Obviously the government. As I said, government has paternal law, just like your father tells you what to do, what not to do. Parents as well, right? Like mother, father, same thing, right? But you are getting my point. Okay, now moving on. Exactly, we are coming to that, Zohan. Then Zohan also gave us another very good example, which is very important. What about pollution, right? Now think about this. I'm sitting in my home. Obviously, perhaps I can stop my neighbor from not polluting the locality, not throwing trash on the street, out on my road, right? On our road. But I can't stop big companies that are polluting the rivers. I can't stop big companies that are polluting the air, by the way. Talking of which, you would know the air quality of Lahore is very, very, I mean, that's nothing funny, but I'm just saying that how government has turned a blind eye to it, right? So, I mean, there's something that needs to be done around that, right? So coming back to the point, so pollution, I can't stop these big companies. You can't do that, right? So individual can't do that. So whose responsibility is it? So obviously the government's responsibility to take care of pollution, right? So that's another thing where the government will intervene, right? Then another point, yeah, then there's another point that we will not talk about in AS, but we will definitely discuss this when you go to your A2, that's monopoly, right? So what is monopoly? And some of you might have played this game, or you might still play it. It's a board game where, you buy real estate, you buy property and stuff like that. So monopoly in economics means single producer. So when there's one firm, one company that produces a certain product or service, that is known as monopoly, right? So the simplest example I can give, um, okay, might not apply to all, like you all belong to different countries, but monopoly in Pakistan Railway is a monopoly, right? It's the only company that provides railway services in Pakistan. Back in the day, PIA, Pakistan International Airline, PIA, was monopoly when it used to, like when it comes to domestic flights, because PIA was the only one providing domestic flights. But now we have some other firms, some other airlines as well, right? So it's no more a monopoly, but you're getting my point, right? So monopoly exploit consumers, that's why the government has to intervene and so on and so forth, right? So these are some of the things that require government attention, right? Now, is everything in perspective, students? Are you getting me, right? So let's do a quick recap and then move on and talk about how will this happen? How will government take control of these things, right? Okay, now unit 3, government intervention in price system. I did tell you that price system or market is when market forces determine the outcome. If government realize that the price system is unfair to anyone, or the markets are being unfair for some reason, right, then the government will intervene and it will try to influence or control prices. Sometimes it's not just about prices, it's about some other things as well that we'll talk about as we proceed, to achieve more equitable outcomes. So that's the objective. Achieving more equitable outcome, that's the objective. Now moving forward, I asked you to think of role of government as more of a paternalistic role, right? Well-wisher for the citizens, paternalistic, right? So it will stop people from doing things that are harmful for them, right? Just like New Zealand is thinking of banning cigarettes, right? Because in the best interest, so as we say, in the best interest of the citizens. Otherwise, if you think about it, it's a stupid policy. I mean, some can argue it's a stupid policy because it's personal choice, right? So some countries are more towards this idea of personal choice, like USA and stuff like that, right? But other countries take more blunt approach towards that. Right. Market failure. Yes, market failure is the word, right? I did not introduce that word deliberately, but yeah, you can use that, right? So think about it, students. When scenarios where market outcome is not fair, right? Another word that you can use for that is market failure, right? So the market has failed to achieve a desirable outcome. So market has failed to achieve a desirable outcome. That is market failure. Are you getting me? Right? So that's market failure. You can also use this word, right? So market failure is a situation where market outcome is not fair or that is not desirable. What could be some possible examples of that? So when people cannot afford basic things like education, healthcare, food, blah, 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 right? Another example of market failure is under consumption of merit goods. Excuse me. What is a merit good? Anything that is beneficial for people. And I did say that healthcare and education are merit goods, right? Then there are other things like exercising and things like that, right? So when people don't fully realize the benefit of merit good, they underconsume, right? And to incentivize citizens and to encourage them to use more of these merit goods, government has to intervene, right? How will government do it? We'll talk about it, right? Similarly, there are some disadvantages, like there are some dangerous or harmful items that people consume, smoking, alcohol, and all these things, right? Right. I'll comment on that. Just give me a second, John. So demerit goods are overconsumed, so the government has to intervene and stop people or discourage people from consuming demerit goods. Then pollution, right? Who will stop pollution or control pollution in a country? Obviously government. And monopoly, I did tell you, it's a single producer, it exploits consumers. So again, it's government's responsibility to take care of that. Okay, now let's move forward and let's talk about how different market failures, or how different cases of market failure, since you know what market failure is, are solved by the government. So we'll talk about each one of these cases one by one. Not all of these cases are part of our AS economics syllabus, so we'll only discuss the ones that are part of our syllabus, because some of these are part of A2. How different cases of market failure are dealt by government, right? Okay, now this is the big question that we will answer, right? We good on this? Any confusion? Anything that's not clear? Okay. I mean, pressure groups. Okay, so there are two comments that I will reply to, right? So the first one was personal choice can lead to more dependency. Okay, dependency on what? I mean, personal choice. The people who support the argument of personal choice, they say that human beings should have the right to choose, right? So I mean, if they want to drink, if they want to smoke, if they want to, I mean, do whatever they want to, I mean, that is what they should be allowed, right? So for them, these concepts don't make much sense, like public morality or, I mean, social responsibility and stuff like that, right? On the other hand, you know people who are, or ideologies that are against personal choice, they think that something is right and something is wrong, right? I mean, both have their own pros and cons, but I mean, that would be a little bit beyond the scope of economics and will not go any further into it. But you can, for your purposes, you can understand the personal choice argument is very much inherent or very much supported by free markets, right? Because that is what free market says, that people should have choice, whatever they want to consume, there should be production for that, there should be supply for that, and things like that. On the other hand, command economy, where government has taken in charge, where government has taken charge of most production, government will always ask the question whether something is good, whether something is needed by the citizens, if something is important, only then government will produce that, otherwise not, right? And second comment that I'm just answering, pressure groups can also be, yeah, I mean, Johan, yeah, they can definitely, the very term pressure groups mean that they can create pressure, but how much effective would that be? I mean, that depends. Obviously, slowly and gradually, we have seen that people across the globe, especially in this technology and internet era, people are becoming more aware. They know about what's happening and so on and so forth. But and they do take actions and they do some activism, as we say. But how much of that helps? That depends. Yeah. But yeah, if there is good pressure groups there which are very consistent, then that would mean that yeah, some government would be forced to take some policy, make some policy around that. Correct. Okay, good. Let's move on. So how different case of market failure dealt? So we'll talk about, discuss each one of these cases one by one. So let's first talk about affordability of basic necessities, right? So let's talk about the very first thing that I gave you the example for, affordability of basic necessities. Okay, now think about this. Food, right, perhaps is one example. I mean, education and healthcare as well, right? But I mean, food is not produced by the government. For education and healthcare, the idea is that there will always be some public schools, there will always be some public healthcare. So the government can, keep prices really low in public schools and public healthcare, in public hospitals, so that people who can't afford private hospitals or private schools can send or come to public, right? But food is something that is obviously produced by farmers who are private entities and things like that, right? And so on. Okay, now think about this. We will look at this graph, and the first scenario that we are about to discuss is affordability of basic necessity. Let's think of it as food, some very basic food item, right? Like wheat, rice, corn, stuff like that, right? Okay, now Q of wheat, meaning quantity of wheat, right? So on the y-axis, we're looking at the market for wheat, right? Wheat is a staple food in Pakistan. I'm sure it would be for other countries as well, but think about this. So you have price per unit, price per kg of wheat on the y-axis, you have total quantity of wheat in kg or in tons produced, right, on the x-axis. Now, what happens in the market, you already know this, right? Nothing new, right? We have studied all of this in unit 2, right? So there is market supply for a product, there's market demand for a good, where market supply intersects with market demand, that is equilibrium point. That shows us equilibrium price, that each kg of wheat would, let's say, sell for 150 rupees per kg, right? 150 rupees per kg, and the total quantity sold in the market during certain time period, let's say, would be 5 tons. I mean, 5 tons, I guess, is too low for a country like Pakistan, but I mean, whatever, I don't know, 50 million tons or whatever, right? 50 million tons, right? Okay, are we good on this, students? Any confusion so far? Okay, now if government realizes that, this is too expensive for people to afford wheat at 150 rupees per kg, then government can impose a maximum price. So the first, as I said, there will be different tools used by government to control, sorry, there are different tools available to a government to control different types of market failure. So you will see in a bit, right, as we proceed in this unit, that for monopoly, for example, or for pollution, for example, the tools that the government will use to control that problem or to solve that problem might be different from other tools that the government uses in other scenarios, right? So the first problem that we are about to discuss was affordability of basic things. And we are taking the example of basic food item, right? Wheat. Okay. Now, if affordability is a challenge, what can the government do around that? And the solution, one possible solution is maximum prices. Now, how do maximum prices operate? Right? We do know the purpose of maximum prices, but how do maximum prices operate? That is what we're about to look at. Okay. You can see the graph. I will explain you. Upward sloping is market supply, downward sloping is market demand. This is equilibrium point, which shows you equilibrium price, which shows you equilibrium quantity. Easy? Good? Okay, great. Now, if government thinks that 150 rupees is too much for an individual, especially a poor individual to afford wheat in Pakistan, it might set a maximum price. Now, maximum price would be below the equilibrium. Remember, maximum price is always below the equilibrium because the idea is to facilitate whom? The idea is to help consumers, right? So government imposes this maximum price, which is, let's say the government now sets the price at 100 rupees per kg, right? So instead of 150 rupees per kg, now the government has set the price equals to 100 rupees per kg. This is what the government has said, that no producer can sell wheat for more than 100 rupees per kg. How many of you are clear on this? Are you guys with me? Are you getting what I've said so far? Okay, now this being said, think about this. The government has made a rule, the government has made a policy that each kg of wheat will sell for 100 rupees. Okay, perfect, sounds good. But there is a small problem. The small problem is that we do know that if you set a price anything apart from the equilibrium price, so it's only the equilibrium price where the market clears. At what price the market clears? Because only at the price of 150 rupees per kg, the supply and demand are equal to each other. There's no other price level, neither at this price level nor at this price level. I mean, at no price level, the demand is equal to supply. So by setting a maximum price over here, you can see that this straight horizontal line, maximum price, is cutting your demand at this point. So you bring this dotted line down and you, right? So I'm just removing this because it's taking a lot of space, right? So let's say at this price of 100 rupees per kg, which is the maximum price, the total quantity demanded in Pakistan for wheat is how much? 70 million tons. And at this price level, you can see where this cuts with the supply curve, the total quantity available or total quantity produced in the market, let's say, is 30 million tons. Now, 70 is being demanded, 30 is available. What happens? What will happen in the market? Students, quickly. What happens in the market? So if there's more demand, less supply, what do we call that? What is this situation called? Yeah. We call this, okay, we call this shortage, right? So this is shortage in the market, or you can say excess demand. I mean, there are different words that we use, but shortage is, I guess, a more commonly used and understood term, right? Shortage means that demand is greater than supply. So quantity demanded is greater than supply, which you can clearly see from the graph, right? Yes or no? So there's shortage in the market. Now, what will the government do around that? Any idea? Because government has to make up for the shortage. Because think about this. I mean, on one hand, government is trying to do good for the citizens by reducing the price. But if that price reduction comes at the expense of the good becoming short, in the market. I repeat myself. On one hand, the government was trying to do, you know, a favor to the citizens, to consumers, by reducing the price of the thing. Very good, excellent, should be done. But if this thing comes at the expense of the product, becoming short in the market, which means demand is more, supply is less, then obviously some people will not be able to buy it. So, I mean, one good aspect of this policy was overcome by one negative aspect, right? Some people are able to afford it on low price, but some people are going without it. So, I mean, that doesn't make sense. Yes or no? So to make up for the shortfall, what will the government do? To make up for the shortfall, the government has two options, right? So the government will not only set the price at 100 rupees per kg, but the government will also make up for the deficit shortfall, right? Either by importing this product from other countries or by using buffer stock. So buffer stock is, simply speaking, the any quantity of this product, buffer stocks, right, that the government might have saved from previous years, right? Because what happens, think about this. If in one year Pakistan produces more wheat compared to what was demanded or what was, consumed in our country in that year, so that will be stored up. That will be, stored up by the government. Government will purchase that, and the government will store it up for future years or future time periods. Why? Because obviously the government knows that in future it might be a bad harvest in some year due to XYZ reasons, and therefore the government might need to release that stock. So that thing is known as buffer stock. Any storage of that product that the government has made from previous years. Easy, students, are you following me or not? So there is two-step process. Let's look at this. So there's two-step process, and the two-step process is that, first of all, in the maximum price, the government will set the price level below the equilibrium. Government will make a policy, make a rule, inform producers that you can't sell a product for more than 100 rupees. This product, this particular product, you can't sell wheat in Pakistan for more than 100 rupees per kg, right? And this is lower than what was the prevailing price level, which was 150 per kg. That's the first step. What's the second step? The second step is that we do know that when you set a price level below the equilibrium price, so the demand is over here, that's the quantity demanded, and that's the supply. So demand is 70 million tons, supply is 30 million tons, right? And the market is not clearing itself. The market is not clearing in itself, which means demand of the product is not equal to supply. Right? Now there's shortage in the market. Now to make up for the shortage, what will the government do? There are two options: either to import the good, right, from another country, right, and then sell to consumers at the price of 100 rupees per kg, and government faces the loss, whatever burden, financial burden the government might have to incur in this, the government will face that. Or the second option is to use buffer stocks. Buffer stocks are, any excess wheat that the government might have saved from previous year, that the government will sell to consumers at this price level. How many of you are absolutely clear on what we just discussed? Confusion? Anything not clear? Anything you want to ask me? Right? So we do know what maximum price is, and we have also, very nice, and we've also understood how maximum prices operate. So the purpose of maximum price is to reduce the price of a basic product, like as basic food item, and how maximum prices are executed, how maximum prices are implemented in the market. We have also looked at that. Now, there's a very similar thing to this, but obviously a little different, is the idea of minimum prices. Now, we will do another situation over here. Now, sometimes what happens, that there are few products for which producers are not getting a fair compensation, right? So just give me a second. I'll quickly connect my laptop to charging, because otherwise it might die very quickly. Just a second. Okay, we good? Okay. Now, I was saying that there could be few products for which producers are not getting a very good compensation, right? So think about this. Think of, and also for these, like, minimum prices are also usually used in agricultural markets like apples, fruits, vegetables, and things like that, right? So apples, as far as my knowledge is concerned, in Pakistan, apples are grown in very selective areas, in the northern areas where people do not have access to very advanced farming technologies like harvesters, pesticides, insecticides, and so on, right? And but obviously, it's a good item to have in your country. You can also export this and blah 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 and all that stuff, right? Now, think about this. If these apples in Pakistan are grown in Hunza, Swat, I think these are the areas, right? Northern region, right? So these people are on their own getting all the machinery, whatever machinery, basic machinery they have, but they are using very conventional farming methods, and therefore they can't even increase their output a lot. When that happens, their income levels would be low. Are you getting me? I'm building this entire story, which is not a story. It's more of the reality, but I'm trying to help you understand why this minimum price is important, right? So the producers or the farmers who are growing apples in Pakistan, they don't get a very high income because they're not using mechanized farming, and therefore they can't benefit from economies of scale. They can't benefit from scale, bigger scale, and so on and so forth. And therefore, if their incomes are too low, then they will be discouraged and they might stop producing that. I mean, just imagine if anyone is growing that and they don't get a lot of income from that. They have to, at the end of the day, pay their bills, they have to sustain a family and stuff like that, right? So they might stop producing apples, right? And Pakistan's government would not like that very much, because obviously it's a good product to have and you can export it and so on and so forth, and you can benefit from this really if you get to produce apples on a large scale and so on, right? Okay, now this being said, so let's say the prevailing price of apples is 200 rupees per kg. Got it? So the prevailing price of apples is 200 rupees per kg. We good? Okay. Again, based on what? Based on market supply, what is the total production of apples in Pakistan, and downward sloping market demand. Okay. Now, if 200 rupees per kg is too less of income, and again, who will decide if it's less? The government. Who will decide if it's less? The government, right? So government will decide if this compensation or this price is less for the farmers, and therefore the government will intervene. Now, minimum prices are very opposite of what happens in maximum prices. The government will set minimum price above the equilibrium. Where will the government set this price? The minimum price will be set above the equilibrium because, as I've just explained you, that the idea is to benefit producers. The idea is to benefit producers. So prices should be obviously higher than the prevailing price level, right? So let's say the government sets the price of minimum price to be 300 rupees per kg of apples, right? Okay. Now, when we look at this, you can see that this minimum price, this straight horizontal line, is intersecting with your supply at this point, and this is intersecting with your demand at this point. So all you have to do, what we did in the case of maximum prices, you'll bring a dotted line down. You'll bring a dotted line down and connect it to the x-axis, right? And similarly in this case, so let's say the quantity that is being supplied. The quantity that is being supplied at this price of 300 rupees per kg is 30 tons, right? And how much quantity is being demanded at this price? Obviously, now the demand will shrink because obviously the price has been increased by the government. So that is 20, what is that? 20 tons. 30 tons is being produced by farmers in Pakistan, but the total demand for apples now in Pakistan is only 20 tons. So there is what? There is excess production. There is excess production of 10 tons. 30 minus 20, 10, right? So there is excess production of 10 tons. You can say surplus, excess production. I mean, these are different words, but they mean the same. You can either call it excess production or you can say surplus, right? Which is obviously opposite of shortage. In the case of maximum prices, there is a shortage. In the case of minimum prices, there is a surplus, right? Now, what will the government do? If the government needs to maintain the price at this level, if the government needs to maintain the price at this level of 300 rupees per kg instead of 400 rupees per kg, which was the equivalent price, the government has to buy the excess output. Why will the government buy the excess output? So that the prices stay at the level where the government wants it to be. So if the government doesn't buy the excess output, what will happen? Market forces, more supply, less demand, what will happen to prices? Prices will go back to the equilibrium point, which government doesn't want. Okay, so students, the class is about to end. We'll stop here for today. I think this is quite a lot for today, right? So tomorrow we'll meet at the same time and we'll continue from here. We good? Good, right? So, and then if you have any questions tomorrow regarding what we have covered today, I'll discuss those, right? So see you tomorrow. Have a good night and take care. Allah Hafiz.